What's going on, everybody? Mod.1939 here, and welcome back to another episode of Ben Builds. Today we are continuing our work on the KV-1 Model 1939. Specifically, we're putting paint to plastic. Today's the day that we start working on this thing and finishing it up. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now I've got everything in here I need to go ahead and paint. We've got the hull, the turret, the fenders, we've got the road wheels here, we've got odds and ends like these little containers right here and there. We've got these things we've got to do. We've got some odds and ends here that we got to paint. And then of course we have the tracks. Now all of this has to be painted. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to use my airbrush and we're going to go ahead and paint them up. Now a brief word about painting. We know that this is going to be a green color. It's going to be, the typical Russian green. And that really doesn't mean much because Russian green came in a bunch of different shades. So what we're really going to do is we're just going to give an approximation of the color that a Russian tank would have been. It's not going to be the exact shade because depending on what they had in the field to go ahead and dilute the paint with, sometimes it was gasoline, kerosene, turpentine, whatever they had, they would use it to go ahead and thin out the paint so they could get the paint on the tank, and it wouldn't always come out the same color. So we're going to use an approximation of the color. But we're going to do one thing before we do any of that. We're going to do something called pre-shading. And pre-shading is a technique that's used by a lot of modelers to go ahead and to create shadow and definition on panel lines. This crease right here on the engine deck, we would then shade this and leave everything else a different color, but this would be a little darker. So we're basically going to go and do what's called pre-shading. We're going to use for pre-shade Tamiya XF69 Nato Black, and this is going to be a great color. We're going to use this, and also we're going to paint the tracks with this as well. And we're not going to put the tracks together right yet. We're going to shoot everything, get everything pre-shaded, then we're going to come back, we're going to paint the tracks with Nato Black, and then we'll assemble the tracks when we get the road wheels on. But that's what we're going to start with. The color that I've chosen to use for the green color is actually a color by Tamiya, and it is called JA Green XF13. This is JA Green, and we're going to use this to go ahead and to shoot the tank. Now if we need to come back with a lighter color such as fading or something like that, we'll probably just mix a little bit of just your stock white in there with it as well, just to give it a little bit of a change of color. Today we're going to shoot pre-shade, and we're going to get maybe the top coat on. So before I run out of too much batteries and I got to recharge the camera, let's go ahead and take a look at an airbrush. This is my Iwata HPC airbrush. I also have Testers Aztec that I sometimes use, but I don't like that one as much. I like this one. This is an older airbrush. This is probably bought this in 2003, 2002. So it's what you call a double action airbrush. Now there are two types of airbrushes. You have single action and double action. This one being the double action, you're going to have two actions you can perform. You can press down on this plunger, which will release air, and you can pull back to release paint. That's all it is. Down for air, back for paint. The farther you press down, the farther you pull back, the more paint and more air you get. So if you want just a little bit of paint, you press down and just pull back a little bit. If you want a lot of paint, you pull back all the way. So it really depends on what you want. You have a lot of control with the double actions. Single action is just single action. You press down and air comes out and paint comes out. We're also using an air compressor. Now I'm not going to pick up the air compressor because it's a little heavy, but it is a preshade, and you might actually end up hearing it come on and off if I've got the sound turned up correctly. It's got a moisture trap, and we're going to cycle this thing up to approximately 10-15 psi. We have a little bit of pressure drop, so I like to hold down the pressure nozzle and then cycle up just so I have exactly 15 coming out of the tip of this thing. Now the whole beauty of the airbrush is this part right here. This is the needle. The tip of this thing, that's what really makes sure that you get a fine spray. It's the tip, and it's a very, very small tip. You can get even smaller tips than that, but this is what I have, and this is what I use. So we're just going to put this back together. let's go ahead and get our preshade. Yep, let's go ahead and get that set up ready to go. Now, some people will use different things to dilute paint, but in order to go ahead and spray this, we're going to need to dilute it. And in order to dilute it, we're going to need some sort of thinner. Now, there's lots of things you can do with it. You can use Tamiya thinner, you can use different types of thinner, airbrush thinner, you can use all sorts of stuff. This is acrylic-based paint, so you're going to have to use some sort of acrylic-based thinner. I would not recommend using turpentine in this, or mineral spirits, or anything like that. If you're gonna thin this out, it's best to use something like this. Basic 70% isopropyl alcohol. It's simple, it's cheap, and it works great. So let me just go ahead and show you how I go about doing this. So first things we're going to need, a container, some sort of clear glass container that we're going to use to mix the paint in. Next thing we're going to need is, of course, our color. And lastly, alcohol, 70%. Now to get alcohol and everything mixed up, let's pull this cap off. We're going to mix it in here. I like to use eyedroppers. That seems to be a pretty good technique to go ahead and do that. So I've got one eyedropper here, and let's go ahead and grab one other dropper. I've got this here, which is just a simple syringe. I got this at the veterinarian place or something, so we can get a certain amount of milliliters of isopropyl alcohol, and we can just add it slowly as we see fit. So we're going to have to take care of that as well. Don't worry, I'm not a drug addict. So let's go ahead. Let's start with Nato Black. Now we're going to shake it up. We're just going to get this started to be mixed here, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, so I think I've mixed it up well enough. Let's go ahead and pour some in here. Cap your paint. It's a good idea to cap your paint. Okay, now let's get the alcohol going. I'm just going to stick this in there, and I'm just going to suck up some of the alcohol. But there we go, syringe full of rubbing alcohol. This way I can set it down and it won't leak all over the place, which is a nice bit of help there. Now this is kind of thick. The reason you can tell it's kind of thick is if we put the cap back on here, and if we shake it, see how it just basically covers the entire sidewall? That's too thick. We want it to be thinner than that. Generally speaking, you want it to be about the consistency of milk. So we're just going to add a little bit of this here. All right, about there. Now instead of shaking it, let's go ahead and grab a toothpick, and we'll use a toothpick just to go ahead and mix it up. So it's a good idea to have some sort of napkin or something in the area. Just mix it up. Yeah, looks about right. Now when you shake it, it slowly fades off of the side, which is about what we want. So, don't worry, this stuff comes off. It's just acrylic paint, so it'll come off. Now we got to load up the airbrush. So let's go ahead and clear out some of this equipment. We didn't need this. Sometimes we use this to go ahead and suck up some paint and drop some paint. We might use it when mixing, but right now we're good. All right. So let's go ahead and load her up and let's paint. So one word of advice before we start painting, I do like to prime the airbrush with just a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Let's see here. There we go. Yep. Okay, cool. We're good about that. Alright, so I've filled up the airbrush. Let's go ahead and paint. Make sure to have everything out of the way. You don't want to knock anything over. Just a bad idea to knock anything over. Now I'm actually going to switch the air compressor to feed mode. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and, first things for pre-shading, we're going to just trace all the lines. You see how we're just tracing all the lines? See that? Right there, let's get around the hatch. Back here. I'm gonna flip it over, shoot underneath here. There we go. Now, so we're gonna let this dry right now, and now we're gonna shoot the tracks. And we're gonna have to get the wheels as well. So let's first off get the tracks out. Here we go. There we are. Now we're really only gonna worry about the different areas. So we gotta get the top of this, and we're gonna pretty well coat these. Pretty well coat them. Alright, we are back, and here is what we have completed. The KV-1 Mod.1939 has been pre-shaded. Now it looks kind of strange, I know, but it's okay, because this is just basically what you would call a pre-shade. So we've got all of these as well, all that. We also have the tracks completed. Front, back, top, bottom, side, whatever we got. So we are all finished up with that. Now comes the time where we're going to go ahead and we're going to give it its primary coat. So that is this XF13 JA Green. So let's go ahead and do it with the same thing, same process we did before. We go ahead and take our bottle, and we're going to go ahead and take some of this and fill it up. Now this is where we might want to take an eyedropper. Suck up some paint, drop it in there. Let's do 4 drops. That's 3, and that's 4. Close this lid up. Always a good idea to close your paints. Set it aside. Syringe full of rubbing alcohol. Go ahead and shoot some of this in there. Now we can use this. Mix it up. See how we're looking. Shake it. Alright. Looks pretty good. So that's ready to go. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take bits and pieces and parts of it. So let's take the turret first off. Take that off there. Let's take off all these road wheels. The road wheels aren't that big of a deal, but it's a good idea to just pull them off because you don't want to get in trouble with it. Top return rollers are pretty good, pretty well stuck on there. This here, it's pretty good. Doesn't matter what order they go in because they're all the same. I'm just going to pull this off. We're not worried too much about down here. This area down here we're not really worried. I'm mostly worried about the top working down into it. So what we're going to do as well is we're going to stick these bad boys on. We're not going to glue them. We're just going to stick them in. Alright, we're just going to fit them in there. Just a little bit there. The reason we're doing this is because we wanted to try and blend things together. There we go. Ready to go. Take a little bit of, I don't know, paper towel or something like that. There we go. Just kind of spray slightly until we've got color coming out. Alright. Looking pretty good. We're going to go ahead and continue that, and we'll be back. Alright, and here we go, the completely painted KV-1 Model 1939. Took us a little time to do today. I think I was about 4 hours the whole episode. Of course, that's abridged for you guys. And yeah, the Tamiya color turned out perfect. I can't say enough how much I love Tamiya colors. They come out with such a nice, silky smooth effect. It's great. We're going to go ahead and clean the airbrush off camera because we're done with it for the day. Quick word of advice when cleaning your airbrush: if you have one of these with a removable needle, really be careful not to nick that tip of that needle. Don't bend it at all because it will affect how your airbrush paints. But other than that, pretty self-explanatory. Tear it down, clean it up, put it back together, put it away safely. We are definitely looking good on this model. We're going to call it quits for the day. We'll come back next time, continue with our weathering process. We've got a lot more to do, believe you me. But this is a close-up here. It looks pretty good. I don't know if you could really tell, but I left that Nato Black kind of showing through a little bit on the JA Green. We've got our top coat, we've got our pre-shade. We might have to do a little more post-shading. Got our road wheels painted, the tracks are painted, everything is painted. So really, it has been an awesome experience so far today. Join us next time when we'll continue with the next couple of steps. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.